Welcome to a glorious summer day here in London, and yes, it's only just May. My name is Dr. David Bull. I'm delighted to be your host here this morning. I'm a medical doctor. I graduated at St Mary's Hospital in Paddington, now part of Imperial College, some 20 years ago. But actually, I've spent the last 20 years broadcasting to children and adults about health issues and trying to empower them to become a healthier and fitter nation. And not just in the UK, I've actually been working in the United States as well. But much more importantly, I'm delighted to be here this morning to be your facilitator and your moderator. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to this live, exciting launch of FDF, or Finished Dosage Formulation. Now, the arrival of this exciting new exhibition reflects the huge growth in dosage formulations in the pharma market. And this will gather together everyone in one place, the whole supply chain in one location. It's going to be a global meeting point for the finished formulations industry. And FDF is a new dedicated zone within CPhI in Barcelona this autumn. Lots to get through this morning, but this really is very, very interactive, so we want your questions. And the way to put your questions to our industry experts is to use Twitter. And we have our very own hashtag, so it's hashtag CPhI Chat. And please do put all your questions, however difficult they are, and we will endeavour to get them answered. Lots to get through, so let's find out what's coming up. So we'll be hearing from the organiser of FDF, Cara Turner. Let's go and say a very quick hello to her.
Good morning.
Good morning. Now, you've flown in from somewhere terribly glamorous, haven't you?
Yes, so from Amsterdam into Luton.
Oh, Luton.
It's like home from home.
Yeah, is that right? And Luton, is that allegedly in London?
Allegedly.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's not, is it?
Not at all.
No. It's fantastic to see you here today. Thank you very much indeed. We're now going to go and meet Alan Sheppard. He's Principal of Global Generics for IMS Health. We heard Amsterdam. You came in from somewhere equally glamorous.
Yes, the lovely sunny Reigate in Surrey.
In Surrey?
Surrey, yes. No,
You've
it's not
changed your
my
mind
accent,
because earlier on you told me it was in London.
Yes, I know, but that's for my American colleagues who have no idea where Reigate or Surrey is, so I stick to London just to make the conversation brief.
Probably wise. I have to tell you, Reigate's quite smart, actually. Very nice, very nice. We'll also be now meeting Jim Miller, who's the president of PharmSource, and he's going to be looking at the latest formulation technologies.
Good morning.
Good morning. And where do you hail from originally?
From Washington, D.C.
Very, very nice. Yeah. And how long have you been over here?
Just a few days for this trip.
And at least you can go back and tell I lived in LA for 6 years, so at least you can go back to America and tell everyone we have amazing weather here.
Well, occasionally you do.
Yeah, actually this is summer. We've only got one more day left of it. Thank you very much indeed. Okay. And then it will be after that reaction time with Paul Fleming, who's Technical Director of the British Generics Manufacturing Association, and we'll be putting him on the spot. Paul.
Morning, David.
Good morning. So, well, you sound terribly British.
Very British.
Yeah, and where are you from?
I'm very polite.
Very polite. Well, yes, we like to apologise.
I've come in from the west of England today, from Devon.
Gosh, all the way from Devon this morning?
Yes, but showing how well connected we are in the UK, that's only 2 hours on the train.
Is that right? Gosh. Takes about that to come in from East London sometimes. So great to see you as well. Thank you very much indeed. And then finally, we'll be wrapping it all up. We'll be hearing from Brand Director at UBM, Rutger Oudejans. Now, Rutger, you're over here. Rutger, you've come in from somewhere glamorous?
I've come from same glamorous city of Amsterdam like Cara has this morning. So, and we also have our last day of summer, apparently, because the wind direction seems to be changing as of tomorrow. We will get the wind chill from the north as of tomorrow, which we are mostly used on about 364 days a year.
Well, I have to tell you, I was in southern Europe this week, and the weather was absolutely terrible. So we need to enjoy it here in northern Europe whilst we have the opportunity. But great to see you as well. Thank you very much indeed. So thank you to all our experts. I'm now going to hand over to my terribly glamorous co-host, Rhylie, who's going to introduce some of the journalists. So, Rhylie.
Yes, certainly. So this is Fiona. Fiona, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, yeah, I'm I'm Fiona Barry. I'm a reporter with BioPharmInsights, so I'm based here in London, just over the river. And I have a few beats, but I have a particular interest in outsourcing, so I'm really here to hear how finished dose formulations have an impact on the CMO industry.
Okay, lovely. I'm going to pass over to you, Aiden.
Good morning, I'm Aiden Fry. I'm the editor of Generics Bulletin, a weekly publication focused on the generics and biosimilar medicines industries, and I'm from the thriving metropolis of Birmingham.
Now, who do we have over here? Mark.
Hi. Morning. I'm Mark Barker. I'm the Managing Director with Pharma Publications. We look into the complete outsourcing industry for the pharmaceutical industry, and obviously contract manufacturing, CDMO, is very crucial to what we report on. So I'm quite looking forward to this interesting meeting today. Thank you.
Super, thank you very much indeed. And then we move to you, Ian.
Thank you very much. Morning, everyone. My name's Ian Evans. I'm a journalist with Pharma Business International magazine, which is part of the Business Link magazine group, which covers everything from SMEs in the East Midlands to pharma to weddings and horse riding in Lincolnshire.
Wow, that's eclectic. And then last but by no means least, Susan.
Hi, I'm Susan Birks. I've worked on manufacturing Chemist for 10 years. We've been established for 8 years reporting on the pharmaceutical industry, and I'm interested to hear what we've got to say today.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much indeed. And perhaps just to, for completeness sake, let's find out who's here from UBM Amsterdam. So perhaps you could just tell us a little bit about who else is here.
Certainly. My name's Rhylie, and I'm the marketing manager for the CPhI Pharma portfolio of events. I'm really looking forward to the FDF launch and what this brings today. We've done the rest of the team, I believe, with Cara and Rutger. So if you could just pass the mic over to Tara, hidden in the corner there, who's been a really big influencer today.
Oh, right, hang on a minute. So, yes.
Hi, good morning. I'm Tara. I'm the senior content producer for CPhI Worldwide, based in London.
Super, thank you. Let's kick off now by hearing from the event manager for FDF. Cara, I think it's over to you.
So good morning, and thank you to everyone joining us today to explore and debate on the FDF market. These sessions are designed to mark the launch of a brand new event that will be co-located with CPhI Worldwide in Spain this October. Now, before I talk further, I'd like to introduce myself, although we've done that already. But my name is Cara Turner, and I'm the event manager for this new co-located event, Finished Dosage Formulation. My role here today is to explain the rationale behind the launch of this exciting new platform and its contribution to the wider market. Over the next 2 hours, we will hear from 3 industry thought leaders, from some members of the industry's top press, and I hope we'll also be hearing from the pharma community at large watching online. Now, the pharma industry as a whole must, of course, continuously evolve to support the needs of the medical community and human health. It must continuously adapt, develop, and grow to meet the needs of its users. Hence the launch of a bespoke FDF event. It's a reflection of the unprecedented pace at which developments in finished dosage form have moved forward in recent years. The question for us is, how can we quantify this market and the opportunities that this market represents? Well, since the introduction of the finished formulation zone at CPhI Worldwide in 2011, it has grown to become the 3rd largest segment of the overall event, totaling over 11,000 square metres in 2015. It's remarkable growth in such a short period of time. It is a clear indication of the growing strategic importance of the FDF market in our pharma portfolio. In terms of the wider industry, the growth has been no less significant. The finished dosage picture in pharma has grown revenues at breathtaking speed, both in emerging and developed markets. At UBM, we have a key role to play in making sure that professionals interested and active in this crucially important field get the chance to gain a global picture on what's happening in the market and why. Even more critically, to get a clear idea of the exciting new opportunities this market is creating for their businesses. So how will we do this? By organising an event that not only explores the key facts of the market, but also gives exhibitors and visitors the chance to source, analyse, and connect with their ideal partners on a successful route to market. The challenge in delivering such an event is in the success of attracting players from all segments of the formulated product supply chain. In the case of finished dosage formulation, we are talking about big pharma itself, contract manufacturers, in-out licensing and dossier specialists, end product distributors, and generic pharma from all around the globe. It's a very diverse community. Our vision is to create a brand that brings all elements of this dynamic space together in one global location, offering a business environment that is greater than the sum of its parts. It's a really tough ask, which is perhaps why no such event is currently available in the market. What we have seen to date are small niche events on regional levels, but nothing global, nothing that enables companies to easily identify their growth, their opportunities, and to become a part of this ecosystem. Many of the existing CPhI visitors and exhibitors have diversified their offering into finished dosage forms over the last 5 years. And what we are now attempting to bring is a new audience to our CPhI family. Effectively, we are bridging the gap between CPhI and ICSE, and between ICSE and the end user. It's a natural progression for the CPhI brand, which has evolved through 3 decades from a small API event into a global meeting place for the entire pharmaceutical supply chain. By giving finished dosage formulation its own voice, its own story, we will be able to provide a vital platform to people who haven't seen CPhI as their essential business event in the past. For CPhI and UBM EMEA, today is the very beginning of our commitment to the FDF market, enabling the connection of new partnerships. And it's these partnerships, particularly across new technologies for advanced formulations and new markets continuing to open in generics, that are the lifeblood of tomorrow's growth. I hope you join us in our excitement today in launching this unique event, and come with us on the journey. Engage with our speakers, ask your questions, and share our story globally. Today, please take an active part in this content-focused presentation, whereby we hope to give a flavour of the dynamic opportunities in this marketplace.
So as we heard from Cara there, lots of really exciting opportunities ahead for the first FDF event. But where are the growth markets in FDF? Well, here to tell us more, as we were just hearing, is Principal of Global Generics for IMS Health, Alan Sheppard. Alan.
Oh, good morning, everybody. It's great to be here today, and as I say, thank you for the introduction, and also to my colleagues around the table who I hope we will have a stimulating discussion. This is not a webinar, so I'm not going to do a really formal presentation. I'm going to put some slides up because I'm very, very weak at being able to visualize things without something to look at. That's my background. FDF, finished dose form, is probably the one thing which in our world is taken for granted. Our customers, the patients, really don't have any understanding of what goes into the finished dose form. They take it for granted. They expect it to be effective. They expect it to be safe. They forget that the industry spends 10 years plus in bringing this finished dose formulation to market. They try and ensure that it's absorbed. If it's not absorbed, is there another way in which it can be delivered? Through patches, through inhalers, through dissolvable tablets, any other way. The industry spends a lot of money, not just on research, but development. But of course, all these skills are not always contained within one company. Outsourcing has become the buzzword in the last 15 years. But outsourcing is essential now for two reasons. One, economy. Two is to have the best knowledge and the best available technology to deliver a finished dose formulation. And of course, to make sure that from the patient's perspective, the product actually meets all of the requirements of an effective clinical therapy. So what I'm going to just talk about the challenge really of where we are today. We have had some significant clinical advances, but at the same time, we haven't had the growth in the economy to actually allow us to move forward with confidence in terms of healthcare budgets. One of my older slides was always talking about how much does the pharmaceutical expenditure represent as total healthcare costs, and it always used to be around about 20%. I haven't done that evaluation for a long period of time, and we get a lot of press about the cost of drugs and the increasing cost of pharmaceuticals, but I'm assuming probably the other healthcare costs have grown at the same time and probably faster. So maybe that ratio hasn't changed, but I think it's something I'll have a look at when I get back again. But today I want to feature on the major growth markets for the finished dose formulations and the opportunities for in and out licensing. So let's look at the total global market for a moment. Now these are IMS figures which are financially based. They do not represent discounts and rebates, so these values are all at the ex-manufacturer prices. So they're overstated to many degrees. But in terms of the healthcare payer, quite often this is the amount of money that the healthcare payer will pay. The rest of the money is in discounts and rebates, which may not benefit the end payer. So when you look at this, and I always use this figure as an astounding figure, by 2020, the global market is going to be worth $1.4 trillion. Now, in my humble life, I cannot really imagine what $1.4 trillion looks like. But of course, this is good news for the pharma industry, because it's a healthy industry, growing, as I say here, at 4 to 7% compound annual growth rate. But from the industry's point of view, regional, globally, the markets are very different. We've looked to the past with pharmerging markets, as we call them in IMS, where we've had more than double-digit growth for several years. What we're seeing now is a slowdown in this growth in emerging markets, mainly because of economic factors, and also a pickup in the developed market growth. Now, the developed market growth is interesting because this reflects two things. One, the innovation that has come through to the market, the new blockbuster drugs that we're seeing. The day of the blockbuster we thought was over, but the day of the blockbuster has come back again, and we're seeing some significant clinical advances, which of course hit the market at premium prices. And we all know the press over the last year or so has been really focused on the prices of medicines, not only in Europe, but also, of course, specifically in the USA. But when you're a pharmaceutical company, what you're looking at is, where can I get the best return? Where is the best demand for my medicine going to be met? And where's my medicine, of course, going to be most effective? So what we can see here is a decline in the growth in the pharmerging markets, but a resurgence of growth in the developed markets, and in particular in the USA. So looking at that, what's driving this growth? Well, again, the press has told us much about biologics, and some of the most significant clinical advances have been in the area of biological therapy, autoimmune diseases and cancers in particular. But what I show here is that when you look at the growth in specialty medicines here, we've got from 2010, 77%, and now 70% in 2015. So you can see the growth in specialty medicines. If you look at biologic versus small molecules, then on the right-hand side there, you've still got a significant growth in biologics, but the foundation of therapy still really remains in the small molecules. So from the generics industry and from those without biologic capabilities, there are still significant opportunities. And indeed, the recent most successful launches mostly were specialist and focused on patient populations, specific patient populations, but not all were biologics. And so we've had some significant blockbusters in the small chemical molecule area. But all of these products were launched into those areas where there was a high clinical need. So the research drive behind the industry is to meet unmet clinical needs. And we have to be honest that there's certain therapeutic areas where we have achieved most of our objectives. The treatment of high blood pressure is an example, the gastroenterological indications, a lot of the dermatological conditions. Lots of our significant challenges have been met, but there still remain some key ones that research is focused on. And that focus is diverging. We've seen the specialty drive, and in the USA, for example, there on the right you see that specialty medicines are driving the growth in the USA. However, if you look at the lower part of that, it's the traditional medicines that are driving the growth in the far emerging markets. The need for what we call older molecules, with the increasing in affluence and access to healthcare in some of the far emerging markets, means that the generic medicines that we have in the West are actually now key growth products for the far emerging markets. If you look at growth, well, 75% of the global growth really comes from 5 therapeutic areas. And these are hepatitis, and we've all seen the Sovaldi-Harvoni story. Here you have a blockbuster product which for the first time in history is actually able to offer up to a 98% cure rate. Now, who's to argue about patients who should or who shouldn't get that? And the cost benefit analysis is not just on treating the patients and curing them, but of course removing the ongoing long-term costs of hospitalization and transplants that would have occurred had not the Sovaldi and Harvoni products hit the market. Oncology, we've seen a diversity of products in this area, a lot of biologics, but also some interesting small molecules. Anti-diabetics, some progress there, particularly with some of the insulins. However, still the foundation of therapy there probably still remain in the older generic product, metformin, and its role is still key in the treatment of type 2 diabetes. Anticoagulants, another area which has shown growth, and of course autoimmune, again driven by the biologics, the anti-TNF products in the treatment of rheumatoid arthritis and associated conditions with the immune system. So that's where the focus of research has been, and this is where the growth is coming from. So for the service providers to the industry, technology, skills, understanding of these therapeutic areas is going to be important for the future. And just to show you that it's not all biologics, and this is just some top-line things. If you look at oral solid regular release products, of the 200 top molecules, 61% are oral solid regular release. Tablets, capsules. Now, I think a lot of research today in terms of finished dose formulation is to try not to provide a simple tablet or a simple capsule. Is to make the formulation unique, to make it difficult to copy, because the investment nowadays in bringing a new product to market, the generic industry is very capable, very innovative. So as industry to make it as difficult as possible for a product to be copied is one of the challenges facing the research-based industry today. And if you look at slow release, then that's about 15% by value of the top 200 molecules. Injectables, a lot of interest in injectables, a key therapeutic area, but they represent only about 4% by value of the top 200 molecules. And inhalers, although asthma is a key disease here in the UK and treated quite effectively, it's still only about 4% by value of the top 200 molecules. For the generic industry, the good news is, of course, is that now, depending on the market, up to 90% of the volume is off patent. Now, if you step back from that and work out, therefore, that 9 out of 10 medicines dispensed are effectively generic medicines, that shows you the number of patients who are treated around the world with generic medicines. Now, there are certain, obviously, variations here, and you can see, so opportunities to grow the generic market in some of these countries is still there. But it's a tremendous achievement by the generic industry to meet the need for affordable, effective and safe medicines around the world. And so congratulations to the generic industry for that. And of course, when you look at the emerging markets, they're almost all dependent on generic medicines, based on affordability, but also based on access to healthcare. So I'm not going to spend time looking at the differences here, but there's one subtle difference, is that as we see an increase in out-of-pocket expenditure and affluence increasing in some of these emerging markets, the preference is for a branded generic. That's not to say that there is an issue with generics per se, but in some of these markets, they want to have trust and integrity in the provider of the medicine. So the name of the provider, the manufacturer, is important. And that is why in markets such as the Far East and some of the developing markets, that GSK is considered as a generic producer, because most of their medicines are off patent, but they are considered as branded generics in many of these markets to us as the industry, but locally they are brands. So looking at that, the generic industry is innovative, and portfolio management now is moving away from, shall we call it, vanilla generics. The skills are there, the technology is there. As the market itself moves forward, the generic industry has to move forward. And again, outsourcing, use of CMOs, use of dossier providers. You cannot easily provide a dossier that meets all of the global requirements. You cannot manufacture in a certain part of the world and supply all of the market. So you need to outsource. And what you're seeing with generics companies is now that they're managing their portfolios in different ways. So we're seeing generics which are branded and unbranded, and of course the development of biosimilars. I'll come back to that in just one moment. But every generic company wants to be a specialty company. This terminology of specialty company comes somewhere between R&D and generic. But the ability to enhance and add value to a molecule makes it a specialty, and it makes it something worth having. The challenge to the industry is, how do you get a price for these added value products? Then of course vaccines are there, but of course one other one which is now key, particularly in developed markets and in where you have out-of-pocket expenditure, is the development of OTC. And generic OTC products based on affordability and pricing are actually starting to play an important factor in many of these countries. I talked about biosimilars. Well, the move towards biologics, as you can see, the top global 10 products in 2015, 6 of them were actually biologics, leaving only 4 as non-biologics, and we know 2 of those are Harvoni and Sovaldi. So if I took those 2 out, you'd probably find that 8 out of the 10 products would be biologics going forward. So the importance of biologics in clinical usage is vital, and they are. The important thing here is, though, is that these products are servicing a much smaller percentage of the population. So what we're doing is spending a lot more money to treat fewer patients. Now, this is absolutely the converse of the generic situation, where we are spending a lot less money to treat a lot more patients. So balancing this demand for increased expenditure on specialty biologic medicines, that's going to be important in the future, to have a growth in the generics industry, supply of generic medicines, to try and bridge that gap. Good news is for the biosimilar developers is, and also for payers, of course, because the one thing we'll see is that payers love biosimilars, that many key biologics are losing their patent protection by 2020. And in fact, there's $79 billion of global sales at risk in terms of biosimilar entry in the next 7 years. In Europe, I'm not going to spend too much time. The biosimilar story is one which changes every month. But one thing is sure here is that when you look at accessing the market, if you have a tender system, as up here in the Nordics, you get very high penetration, up to 90% market share through tenders. And this is a tender based obviously on the lowest price. There's a lot of other factors in here, interchangeability, substitution, but I'm not going to spend time on that at the moment. But what you can see in the EU5, where we don't have a true country tender system, it's been incremental growth. Slow growth, but significant growth. Many factors affecting that as well. And it's also originator pricing strategies and accessing to the originator product as well. But the one thing here is there's an indicator here. If the healthcare system is in a position to influence the use of biosimilars, then you can see the biosimilars taking a far greater percentage of the market than anybody ever really anticipated when biosimilars came to the market 10 years ago. Just to say that, of course, the future is also going to be very much driven by biologics, but those companies in the small chemical molecule area, fear not. In terms of phase 1, phase 2 and phase 3, there are significant small chemical molecules that are going to have a major impact in clinical therapy as well. So there's a good balance, but once again it's going to be the biologics based on price that's going to drive the value market. Also, those of you interested in specific technologies, the growth in the orphan drug market is significant. And as you can see here, 27% of phase 3 registered products are actually going ahead as orphan designated. I talked about OTC briefly, but as David was saying earlier, you know, the communication between patients and consumers is something which the industry's got pretty good at. And the opportunity now to actually take prescription medicines into the community after a period of time, proven safety, proven efficacy, is significant. And of course, just trying to get people to be healthier. I'm a classic example of a failure of that strategy. However, I'm not perhaps representative of the global population. But there is a drive for health. And when you look at the OTC market, line extensions are still probably the most common and proven way to extend a brand's life. And the industry is still focusing on this area. But we all know now that we're in the age of technology, hence today almost, with regard to how we are putting this out. You can see the use of social media, apps, devices, and sensors. All of these things are changing the way in which our patients, our consumers, actually manage not only their lifestyle, but actually manage their health. All of these things give us a global opportunity, but I said right at the start, there's no one company. There isn't really an expert in global pharmaceutical marketing. Every company needs help. And when we look at expansion, geographical expansion, licensing opportunities and partnering are there because you can actually expand without having risky investments. You can partner in terms of geographical expansion. Local companies have access to fast regulatory approvals, fast entry into the market, fast pricing approval. And so using a local company through licensing does speed access and penetration. Some companies require local manufacturing, so of course you need to partner in some way with those countries. Portfolio expansion from in-licensing from small manufacturers have limited resources. Well, I won't call Celltrion a small company, but there was a company who had a product that they wanted to bring into the West, but had no presence in the West, so out-licensed probably their most successful biosimilar at the moment, infliximab, into Western pharma companies. Avoid investments in technology. As I say, as we move to different delivery systems, the capabilities to have these in-house is not there. Quite often is not there. So the use of outsourcing for these technologies is important. And also partnering with therapy experts. If you have a good product and you want to go to market, if you're not in oncology, then trying to be a single product newcomer to the market in oncology is very difficult. Partner with somebody who knows the market or out-license your product in that way. The thing about local players is they have knowledge and access across all functions, which generally means they grow faster in every segment. So in terms of geographical expansion, out-licensing and partnering is key for some of the far emerging markets. So in summary, growth returns to the developed markets which of course really does raise concerns on access and affordability of healthcare. Growth is mainly from innovative medicines delivering improved clinical results. This growth is tempered though by generic medicines growth increasing, its usage is there and contributing to balancing medicine costs, but also improving access at the same time. Far emerging markets do prefer branded generics, whereas our developed markets favour INN, generically prescribed products. As soon as you put a brand to anything, the cost tends to go up. The perception is that. Biosimilars continue to impact on the biologics market, and it is driven by lower costs and affordability, and that will continue to do so. The one message through all of this, with this growth, this innovation, costs will remain at the top of the agenda of most healthcare providers for the foreseeable future. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Alan. And perhaps I could just pick you up on just a couple of things that you said. And I think one of the things that you said right at the beginning is customers take the pharmaceutical industry for granted. But surely, I'm playing devil's advocate here, that's your job, you know, in terms of efficacy, in terms of safety. That's really actually what you should be doing, and surely customers should be able to rely on that.
No, that's absolutely true. And I think the ABPI published recently that the image of the pharmaceutical industry has improved in the last couple of years or so. I can remember when I had hair that that the industry always had bad press, and I think even to today, even as of today, that the media still covers the negative news rather than the positive news. So I think the industry still has a lot to do to make sure the media appreciate what they're doing. But you're right. I think most patients are thankful and grateful for the medicines that they take that are effective. And that's 99.6. I was going to say 99.9. But there are always issues. There are always side effects with medicines. And it tends to be sometimes those issues which hit the press.
I think for consumers, it's always felt like quite a secretive industry. And I think, you know, I'm not sure the industry's been terribly good about talking about the cost of R&D and making customers aware of that. But I want to pick up on one other thing as well, which is clearly the growth is in generic drugs. And I want to ask you, in terms of countries, because obviously we have people from all over the world watching this, so is there you talked again about trust, is there an issue with the public trusting a generic? For example, having lived in America for 6 years, I know that the Americans like a brand more than the Brits. Does that break down across the world like that, so that people feel that if there's a brand, there's more trust attached to it?
I think there's two things. One is where the patient or the physician has a choice versus those countries where the patient or the physician doesn't have a choice. If you pay for your medicine, then you should have a choice. And this tends to lead you to a brand. Those countries where the government pays for the medicine, for example here in the UK, although it's assumed that the patient doesn't pay, okay, there's a prescription charge, but as we know, the majority of people in the UK are exempt from paying that prescription charge. So whether it's the fact that the patient doesn't have to pay, that they accept a generic named product rather than a brand name product, I don't have the answer to that, but I'm pretty sure that the influence is the system itself.
Well, isn't it also two other things? Firstly, it's about information and knowledge, and I'm amazed how much more Americans know about drug names. But secondly, of course, you've got direct advertising to consumers in the States, which here in Britain is not allowed.
No, and there's two elements to that. One is awareness of a brand, and the second part of it is the awareness of disease. Americans, and I have a home in America as well, so I'm sort of a bit bilateral in that respect. But in the UK, people really trust what the doctor says and what the pharmacist gives them. If you asked a patient in the UK, what are the side effects of Xyloric for gout? They probably wouldn't have a clue. I was name dropping, I was in Paris having a glass of red wine, and I pulled out my Xyloric to take with my red wine. And there was an American sitting at the next table. Yeah. And he said to me, "Do you know the side effects of that drug you're about to take?" And I was gobsmacked. I knew the side effects, but here was a patient in the USA who'd read the patient information leaflet, knew exactly what the side effects were, and told me all about my drug. Whereas 90% of UK and probably European patients wouldn't have a clue.
I totally agree with that, and they never read those patient information leaflets, which are far too small anyway. And one final point from me, which I just want to pick up on those 5 key areas. I was really surprised, given that you talk about prevention, and clearly that's where people like me are pushing on television, saying you've got to take responsibility for your health. I was surprised that HIV was number 6. I thought it might be higher. There's a massive argument raging over that, as you know, within the United Kingdom. There are preventative drugs available in the United States, in France, but not here in the UK. You clearly, as an industry, you want to grow that preventative side and get government on board to push for the licensing.
And I think that the HIV medicine producers are 100% behind that. There are many issues around that, but it's a delicate political issue because there are other concepts associated with prophylaxis and then appropriate behaviour. So that is one of the chestnuts which I think some of the, and it really is the system rather than, as you know, the clinical need. Prevention is better than cure, but when you can have a cure, then it's chicken and egg there. But I take your point. PrEP is a hot topic at the moment, and
massively hot topic. And that's pre-exposure prophylaxis for those that don't know what we're talking about.
And I think that we will see significant moves in that direction shortly. And I think the important thing there is it is going to be public demand, once again through the media, that's going to probably influence things.
Well, interesting, the UK government has reneged its decision and is going to relook at it thanks to public support or decision. Thank you very much indeed for the moment, Alan. Well, as you no doubt understand, new technology plays a vital role in the FDF industry. But what is at the cutting edge? Let's hear now from our next speaker, the president of FharmSource. I'm afraid I did say that wrong earlier, but FharmSource, Jim Miller. Jim, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, David. Thanks very much, and thanks to everyone from UBM for inviting me here this morning. We're going to take a look at the really at the contract manufacturing aspect of the finished dose form marketplace, and look at some of the dimensions and where that's going. But I wanted to start by making the point that just the significance of the finished dosage form in terms of getting the drug to the patient. You know, so much of the discussion within the pharmaceutical industry is typically around intellectual property. So, you know, creating intellectual property, protecting intellectual property, valuing intellectual property. Companies and products and ideas are bought and sold based on the intellectual property. But the bottom line is, a physician will never say, take 2 units of intellectual property and call me in the morning. The intellectual property has to be made into a physical product that can be delivered to the patient. And that's really what the finished dose form is about. So it really is that, as I've said, the physical manifestation of the scientific understanding of the disease and the intellectual property that has been developed around curing or at least managing the disease. So when we talk about finished dosage form, it's really the part of the process that most impacts the patient. One thing that's often not appreciated, and again, in part because of the focus on intellectual property, but also on within the pharmaceutical industry, and certainly in the history of CPhI, the focus has been on the active ingredient. But really, the finished dosage form is typically, for much of the business, the most expensive part of the product to make. When in the case of a branded new molecular entity, often the API is most expensive, the active ingredient, and that's because typically it's early on in the life cycle of the product. The manufacturing process hasn't been fully fine-tuned and so forth. So the API cost is often the greater part of the cost. But once the product becomes generic, and typically you'll have 3, 4, 5, maybe even 10 manufacturers who can supply the generic API, the price of the active ingredient goes way down, and it's really the cost of converting that API into a finished dose is where the expense is. So for a generic, the finished dose form expense is actually the biggest part. And then when you get into an OTC product, again, often because the product, partly because the API is so inexpensive at that point, and also because there's so much effort put into differentiating the product by way of the dosage form, and whether it's an extended release or some simpler way of delivering the product. It could be something as simple as color or shape in order to differentiate the product. There's a lot more effort put into the into the dosage form itself, along with the packaging, because of course once you go into the pharmacy, you want to catch the consumer's attention. So it's the finished dosage form and the packaging that are really the most important parts of the overall cost of goods, and the API piece is really relatively small. So when we think about a finished drug product, we really do need to be thinking about the effort that's gone into make that finished dose form. CMOs contract manufacturers play a significant part in that whole supply chain in terms of making the API into a finished dosage form that can then be administered to the patient. In our analysis, if we just look at FDA approvals, and I know that's a little bit US-centric, but the FDA is much better at providing data than some of the other regulatory agencies. And also, most new molecular entities are approved by the FDA and by the EMA. So you're really looking at the same universe of products. But over the last 10 years, about 45% of the products that have been approved as new, not as generics, but as branded products or patent-protected products, about 45% of those drugs have their finished dosage form made by a CMO. So, and that's something that I think is certainly not fully appreciated around the industry. It's certainly not fully appreciated in the regulatory agencies. We presented this data to some FDA representatives last year, and they were really surprised. They had no concept that CMOs played such an important part in the supply chain. So CMOs are really significant players in this market, and the CMO industry has really grown at a fairly robust clip, 6 to 7% a year over the last 5 or 6 years. And that's because more and more drug companies are entrusting the manufacture of that finished dosage form to CMOs. And what we see around the industry is, particularly for small molecule products, solid dose, but also injectable products, as the big pharma companies move their pipelines to incorporate more biologics and relatively fewer small molecules, they're actually outsourcing a greater percentage of the small molecule products, even as they build more facilities to manufacture their biologics products. So CMOs are really becoming much more integrated into the supply chain for products than has been the case in the past. It's also worth noting that when we look at the CMO industry more broadly and think about both the big API companies as well as the finished dose companies, really all but 2 of the 10 or 12 largest CMOs have a significant position in the dose manufacturing part of the business. So if we go down the list, Lonza is certainly well known. They're probably the biggest, or certainly one of the 3 biggest players in the CMO industry. They don't yet have a dose manufacturing capability, although they're putting in some small-scale clinical manufacturing capability this year. But Patheon and Catalent, both of which exceed $1.5 billion in terms of their contract manufacturing revenues, are primarily dosage form manufacturers. And then if we go down through the list of companies with revenues of $500 million or more, again, all but one of them have a significant presence in the finished dose area. So as the CMO industry grows and matures, we're seeing a lot more large companies created partly through organic growth and partly through mergers and acquisitions. It's really the finished dose side of the business that's driving that consolidation and maturity of the CMO industry. It's also been the case that with all the M&A activity that there has been in the CMO industry, again, a lot of that has involved CMOs, finished dose manufacturers. But as you can see, often the valuations that are paid for those companies are really quite high. So if you think about say typically, if you're looking at a private equity situation where, excuse me, a company might be valued at 8 to 10 times earnings before taxes and depreciation. So that's what EBITDA is about, and that's kind of a proxy for cash flow. You can see typically finished dose form CMOs are being valued at 10 to 15 times their EBITDA or their cash flow. And those are really very high multiples when you look more broadly at the kind of valuations that companies get. And so we've seen a lot of activity in this area in recent years, with Patheon being an active acquirer. Siegfried has really converted itself from primarily a API CMO to a broad capability CMO with both dosage form and API. Same with AMRI, which has both. Really, most of the companies on this list now have both API capability and dose form capability, and that's been a major development in the industry, as well as the creation of these full service API companies or CMOs. But the point being that there has been such demand for CMOs in terms of investors and companies wanting to broaden their capabilities, and there really haven't been very many for sale. So what those companies that have been on offer have gone at very high multiples in recent years, and we'll see, I think, several fairly large deals in the next 3 to 6 months involving dosage form CMOs as the industry continues to consolidate. So as we move forward, we really see finished dosage form development and manufacturing as really of growing importance around the industry, and that reflects a lot of the dynamics that Alan was talking about in terms of the evolution and the competition within the pharmaceutical industry, the effort to differentiate products, but it also has a lot to do with the nature of the products that are being developed and some of the technical challenges that a lot of the new products have. So we'll just step through a couple of these. One is just the question of bioavailability, the idea that a drug, once it's administered, whether it's orally or through injection or topically, it ultimately has to work its way through the body, gets absorbed into the bloodstream, delivered to the target, wherever that is. And that's been a real challenge with a lot of the new products that are being developed, because they are poorly soluble. In other words, they're not soluble in water very readily. And if a drug is insoluble, in most cases, it has no bioavailability. So it can't get to the target. It can't have a therapeutic effect. And so we see technologies that are typically administered at the finished dose point to try to enhance the solubility of the product. So technologies like spray drying, hot melt extrusion, micronizing, which just grinds the active ingredient into very small particles. All of those have become increasingly important to improve the bioavailability of the product. We also have a lot of interest in taste masking. A lot of the products that don't taste very good, they're bitter, and if you're going to get the patient to take them, you have to enhance the flavor in some way, at least for those few seconds where they have it in their mouth and get it down. So taste masking becomes important, and then controlled release. And the idea there being, obviously, if you can improve patient compliance by giving them something that they only have to take once a day, or maybe once a month, once every 3 months. If you look at the products like Enbrel and Humira that have been developed for rheumatoid arthritis and other autoimmune diseases, you can see a progression where the Enbrel, which was the first major one to come out, would have to be they're self-injected, but they would have to be self-injected every 2 weeks. When Humira came out, that was just a monthly injection, and I think Cimzia may only be an every 3-month injection. So the idea of having a controlled release so the patient doesn't have to remember when to take the dose quite as often, and doesn't, if it's unpleasant, it doesn't have to go through the unpleasantry quite as much. It's critically important. So, so just from a technical standpoint, there's this interest in or finished dose plays a more important role. The evolution of self-administered therapies has become important. Again, as we've seen, drugs that are developed to treat autoimmune diseases like rheumatoid arthritis or psoriasis or Crohn's disease, or drugs that are inhaled, and of course the diabetes products. All of those are typically self-administered by the patient, or someone gives them in the house from the household will give it to the patient. And so the ability to develop delivery devices, administration devices that can be easily handled by the patient becomes important. If you think of, for instance, someone who has rheumatoid arthritis, that person has to have a device that makes the drug easy to administer. If it's painful to hold or needs a lot of pressure to administer, that's not going to work very well for a patient with rheumatoid arthritis. So devices are developed that make it much easier to administer. People don't like to watch themselves give it an injection, so if you can put together a device, an auto-injector device where the patient doesn't need to see the needle, that often helps a great deal in terms of compliance. So what we've seen with the graph on the right here is that just in the last couple of years, as we've seen more biologics come to market, we've also seen an increase in the number of pre-filled devices, whether they're pre-filled syringes or auto-injectors, other kinds of devices that, again, don't require the patient or the practitioner to use a needle, withdraw the product with a syringe from a vial, and then administer it. It's already packaged in the syringe and is ready to go. Or we've seen the inhalation devices, and the pictures here were both of devices from Bestback, which is an interesting company because it under its parent company, Consort Medical, actually has a sister company now that is a contract manufacturer, and they're moving to the ability to, in a sense, to offer a one-stop shop where you get the device and have it filled from the same company. And I'm not sure that's a big trend, but certainly it's a unique strategy. in the industry. Product differentiation, as I mentioned, is critical and is something that companies will pay for, particularly at the OTC level. So it could be something as simple as shape, color, size that differentiates one product from another. Extended release, the idea that if you can take a product once a day instead of having to take it 3 or 4 times a day. Certainly in the States we see advertisements all the time for, say, a product like Aleve, which can just needs is an over-the-counter painkiller that is one dose will last 12 hours versus other product. They compare themselves with Tylenol, which is acetaminophen, or I guess that's paracetamol over here, whatever. That has to be taken every 4 hours, and so the idea that you can dose less frequently is a big selling point. And now increasingly orally dissolving products, which and the examples here from Catalent, their Zydus product, the point being that they're fast absorption, they don't have to be swallowed. So for both convenience purposes, obviously you don't need water, but also that there are parts of the population, like the elderly, that may have difficulty swallowing a tablet. The idea of a fast dissolve formulation is very attractive. So just some final thoughts then. The finished dose form, as I say, is a very significant but really underappreciated part of the supply chain and of the development process, but I think it's one that's becoming increasingly important. It's a much bigger part of the value-added proposition now, both in terms of enabling a lot of the new medications that are coming out that frankly couldn't be delivered or administered if it weren't for innovations in the manufacture of the dose form. But also increasingly we're going to see device makers joining CMOs as major players in the finished dose form area.
Could I just ask you quickly on that? You say there that finished dose form is significant and underappreciated. Is there a kind of gold standard? Because you're looking at bioavailability, you're dealing with human beings, so color clearly is important. The length of duration, the efficacy of the drug. Is there something that you look for as a gold standard? A drug that has great bioavailability that you only have to use once every 6 months? How do you ensure best compliance?
Wow. Interesting. Well, first of all, the first criteria is always going to be efficacy. Does the drug do what it's supposed to do? Does it? And so, regardless of how it's delivered, the first thing the physician and the patient are going to think about is, will it cure my disease, or will it make my life easier by reducing the symptoms in some way? So, first and foremost, that's the gold standard, if you will. I think in terms of then, if you're looking at say multiple products or whatever that have similar efficacy, then ease of administration. Simplicity, the ability to say to dose less frequently, the ability to take it, say, without gastroenterological effects like upset stomach, becomes very important. So, if you think of something like a at the high end, something like a fast dissolve tablet that you just put on your tongue or under your tongue, and it dissolves quickly and doesn't, and you don't need water. That's a pretty simple way to take medication. But it's an expensive way to take medication as well. So it may not be applicable to all situations, and not all products can be formulated into that kind of dose form. If it's an injectable product, first of all, the ability to administer at home rather than have to go to a clinic to have it administered is certainly a major step forward. And then within that, then the ability to, as I say, to administer simply with, say, an auto-injector or one of these pen devices where you dial the dose and give it, which is common for insulin products. Those really are, those are today the simplest thing. Are now, even with insulin pumps, the wearable pumps that people, they just push a button when they need need some insulin. So the administration keeps getting simpler, and the gold standard keeps moving out, if you will.
Well, that's a good thing, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, I'm constantly struck by you can never underestimate your patients, because they'll do extraordinary things with drugs that you never really think they're going to do. And actually, I was working on an ADHD drug, and you talk there about bioavailability, and if it's a dissolvable drug, for example, if you get true bioavailability where it dissolves so that drinking half the glass gives you half the dose, then that's a win-win for the patient and for the doctor as well. I know, Rutger, you wanted to jump in, did you, and say something?
Yeah, I just want to bring a little bit the event perspective also into play, because, of course, we are launching the FDF co-locate, and yes, we see quite a bit of overlap between CMO and companies. Yeah, you said yourself, 35% of the CMOs are venturing into that landscape for obvious reasons. Also, you're saying device makers are venturing into the landscape because of the administration capabilities that these device makers offer. But for us, it's challenging to find who is out there in the industry that would particularly be interested in being part of FDF. So I was thinking also, for instance, from the excipient side, because excipients also have a big role to play in either bioavailability.
That's right, yeah.
Or actually efficacy of drugs. It's sometimes underestimated. So could you elaborate a little bit on the playing field that we have as a pharmaceutical platform in terms of attracting FDF companies to our show?
Yeah, no, that's a good point, because you're seeing a lot of technology development in the excipient area to go along with some of these some of the issues like bioavailability, or to help, say, develop controlled release. So you have a number of companies, for instance, that develop excipients that are really designed to facilitate the development of what they call matrix formulations that can allow fast dissolve or controlled release formulations, and so the major players in the excipient world are doing that, or new excipients that are really geared towards the spray drying or hot melt. That would be blended with the product, and you have a number of new drugs are coming out with what they call multi-particulate formulations, which are really small. They're beads, and you'll fill a capsule with a lot of these small beads, and the beads are the API that have then been coated with some sort of polymer that allow it to be better. To be more bioavailable, to dissolve better. So all of that has put new demands on the performance of excipients. And so, to your point, you're seeing excipient makers really put a lot into R&D to develop those capabilities.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Now, I'm now joined by Technical Director of BGMA. This is Paul Fleming. Great to see you. In fact, you've also been chair of the Regulatory Working Group, and I understand that that's where you had great associations with the MHRA, Department of Health, NHS, and so on. So you're a man who's talked to a lot of stakeholders in the past.
Thanks very much for inviting us along this morning. It's been interesting to hear what the other speakers have had to say. One aspect that hasn't been mentioned so far that's very important in the availability of medicines for patients is continuity of supply. There have been instances where there have been shortages or risks of shortages in important medicines, life-threatening conditions involved as well. So I see one of the benefits of the FDF.
And why is that the shortage? Because of the manufacturing process that's gone on, that there just hasn't been continuity of that process?
There have been multiple reasons. Some of them have been availability of materials, active ingredients, or some issues at manufacturing sites that have led to interruptions in supply. So there's been multiple things behind it. But it has been an issue, not just in developing countries, but in Western Europe and in the US as well, particularly with these more high technology products that we've heard talked about this morning. So more closely integrating the different parts of product development, manufacturing, the supply chain, making the medicines available, all of that more tightly brought together should help to contribute towards finding solutions to those sorts of issues. So I personally see that as one of the potential benefits that could come out of FDF being more tightly connected as a forum, bringing together all the different
So basically
people.
bringing everyone together, ensuring you've got that continuity of process, you've got all the right people in the right room talking about that continuity.
That's right, and also helping to give oversight across the whole of the supply chain, which is also a very important factor.
Yeah, and we talked earlier about trust, actually. You know, running out of your medication is very traumatic for any patient, you know, and that it does happen where you cannot get hold of those. So I assume that will go partly towards restoring trust from the patients as well.
Yes, because there's nothing worse for a patient than going to their pharmacy, hoping to get their medicine and being turned away or having a delay. And of course, one of the main contributions of the generic part of the sector is there are multiple suppliers. So you're not reliant upon a single branded medicine. So in the generic market, if one manufacturer can't supply, another one can step in, so the patient doesn't suffer.
But I assume that's also, I mean, it's quite interesting. There's a drug that I'm working with at the moment where they have run out. There's a preferred supplier of the generic. They have run out, and there's been unprecedented need for it. And there's now a 6 to 8 week wait. No one really knows how long it will be until the generic manufacturer can get those products to market again. Again, and that's another trust issue, isn't it? Because what do you do as a consumer?
Another benefit that I see from what we've heard about this morning is the use of newer technologies. So one of the benefits with generic companies moving into product development is they are doing it today. So they have the opportunity to use newer technologies that can be more robust, more reliable, use more continuous methods of manufacture, which is a step on from the technologies that would have been in place 15 or 20 years ago when the original version of the medicine was in place. So I wouldn't underestimate that those issues do still occur, but hopefully they're becoming less so.
Yeah. And why do you think it's important that FDF has its own dedicated zone at CPhI?
Well, personally, I would think it's because of the point I made a couple of moments back, which is to do with tying things more closely together, both for integrating the different elements of the supply chain and also keeping things as simple as possible, and also having that oversight to ensure that it's not just about bringing the product to market, but make sure that it's continuously available throughout its lifetime, which for some of the medicines we've even heard about today, they're available and used and very commonly prescribed for decades. So it's not just about bringing the product to market, it's about making sure it's available to patients continuously for many years to come.
So you really do believe there are opportunities to be had that, you know, that you can capitalise by bringing everyone together?
I think so, and I think it's not just in the context of the event we're talking about this morning and the programme of work that UCB are doing, but also across the industry as a whole. There is much more attention on looking at the robustness and security of the supply chain, so this can play a part towards that.
Super. Well, thank you very much indeed for the moment, Paul. And lots of questions already coming in. Perhaps I could ask you to take your seat back again. Thank you. I'll take this off you. And I shall now hand this over to Rhylie. Now, Rhylie, I know that we've been talking about this hashtag. We've had some questions already, and I think it's time maybe to put some of those questions to our esteemed panel.
Yes, certainly, Dr. David, no problem. So this one is aimed for Jim, but obviously this is a discussion, so anybody can jump in. Earlier you stated in your presentation that CMOs account for a high percentage of FDF manufacturers. So this question came in online from Dan Stanton, who's the editor at BioPharm Report. And he said, as one of the fastest growing areas in pharma, how have CMOs adjusted their service offerings to ensure a larger slice of the FDF market share?
Wow. Well, good question, and thanks to Dan for asking that. I think you're seeing a number of developments there. One has been just to kind of broaden their capabilities. The largest CMOs typically have more capabilities in terms of more dosage forms, and will typically have facilities on multiple continents. So they can both operate on a more global basis, and they can service more of the pipeline than perhaps they could in the past. And I would say also another trend you're seeing is more CMOs that are trying to offer both the finished dosage form and the active ingredient, the API. As you saw from the one slide, many of the companies on that list had capabilities for both finished dosage form and CMO and API. So they've positioned themselves to be something of a full service or one-stop provider, where a company with a molecule can take that to one supplier, have the API process scaled up and manufactured, and then the API converted to the dosage form, all within one manufacturing organization. That's been an important, it's a relatively recent development in the industry. We'll see how important it actually becomes. But I think it also has a lot to do with just reliability and quality and depth of capability. That the CMO industry is a lot more sophisticated today than it was 10 or 15 years ago.
Okay, thank you. I just he had a further question from your insightful presentation. He'd like to hear your viewpoint on, and it was, how is the demand for increasingly complex FDFs affecting the ongoing consolidation trend among CMOs?
It's having a big effect, really, because a lot of the M&A activity in the industry is driven by companies trying to acquire new technologies that can extend their capabilities and address these issues. So to give a few examples, a couple years ago, Catalent, which is one of the 2 or 3 biggest FDF CMOs, acquired Micron Technologies, which is specialized in micronization, grinding the API down to very fine particles. And because they wanted to add that capability to their full offering. Capsule Gel bought Bend Research. Bend Research is a leader in spray drying technology. Patheon bought Agir, which is a smaller spray drying company founded by someone who used to work at Bend Research. And there was news just the other day that Aptuit bought a small company here in the UK called QCept, which also does spray drying. So you're seeing, certainly reaching for the technology has been a big driver of the M&A activity. And then you have a situation, like I mentioned, with Consort Medical, which has tried to combine its device capabilities with the contract manufacturing capability, so they can offer kind of a full service device and filling the device offering to the market. So the ability to add those technical capabilities has been a big driver of the industry consolidation.
Okay, thank you. A very thorough answer. I'm sure that Dan will be very pleased. I have a few more, but I will intercept.
Well, let's just find out. Does anyone around the table have any questions? I mean, I think there's been quite a lot of information there. Or are you going? Have we stunned you into a shock slightly? Have you? Yes, great. So let me just come over to you, Susan. What's your question?
I'd like to ask Alan what he thinks about the Indian generic market, what trends are occurring, and what market implications will these have?
Great question.
Well, I think it's a very good question, Susan, because for the last 5 years, as I've been talking to some of my Indian clients, the Indian market itself is growing and continues to grow rapidly based on affordability. increasing affluence and also access to healthcare. And the Indian government has moved a long way with regard to insurance coverage for much of the population. Okay, getting to get access to that healthcare is not easy in certain places, but I've advised many of my Indian clients, if you're looking to expansion, look within India, because as that market is growing rapidly, the opportunities are there for a lot, as I say, for a lot of the older molecules that are off patent, rather than the risk of going into the developed markets, Europe and the USA. I used to work for Dr. Reddy's, who obviously had a strategy of international expansion and have been very successful at it. But there are other local Indian companies who have focused internally and for the emerging markets and have also done extremely well. Okay, margins may be lower, but volumes can be much higher, risk is less. So the Indian market is very attractive, and particularly if you're an Indian player. And I think we've learned that the acquisition of Indian companies by European or American companies is now sort of almost frowned upon by the Indian government. So inward investment by Indian companies probably offers more opportunities now versus the competition from big international players.
And perhaps I can ask there, what about quality control from India? Because I think that's an issue if you're a purchaser. Have you a comment on that?
That's a very good question, but also a very political one in many respects, because once again, it's the bad news that gets the media attention. And we have issues in the USA with plants, we have issue in Europe with plants. I think the biggest concern is when that it's almost like a criminal offence that someone has deliberately changed data, and the evidence for that in India is no different to really the rest of the markets. I think the confidence in the major Indian companies is there, and let's face it, the USA, they import a lot of Indian products, have a lot of Indian players in the market in India. I'll be a little bit controversial and say that the same cannot be said necessarily as of today with the majority of Chinese manufactured products, and part of that is a cultural and language issue in terms of understanding what is fully required.
Is there an element of secrecy though? Because obviously India has I would say, and it is a political point, has a more sort of open dialogue possibly than other countries.
Yeah, but I think also the regulators know the Indian market. They know the Indian companies and they inspect them quite regularly. So I think you're absolutely right to raise that issue, but I think really people assume that the quality is less good, bad English, but the quality controls are lower in India than they are in other markets. Now, part of the reason for that is that India has used patent infringing materials, which means that the products are not available and usable in the Western markets. So sometimes there is the assumption that that product is inferior, but it's not necessarily that. The Indian government now, and I think companies like Dr. Reddy have said, the products they develop will be for global markets and not just for the Indian market. So they have accepted that there is a perception that the products in India are less quality assured than the products outside of India, and that's not really true.
So are you saying they get products to market quicker in India because of the way they're doing it?
Yes, generally speaking, the markets will come to... There's two things which drive the market access in India. One is affordability, and so we have the compulsory licensing issues that we've seen in India with regard to access to some of the newer medicines which have been unaffordable in India, so compulsory licensing invoked for certain products. But at the same time, there's a big demand for the older products as well. And the regulatory approval in India is sometimes difficult, but you're dealing with one country, whereas if you're trying to get regulatory approval in Europe, you're dealing with 27 odd countries, and it can be a minefield. So I say to my Indian clients again, that do what you're good at, which is supplying the Indian market. There's a huge opportunity there.
Perhaps I could just ask a very political point, given that, I think most people around the world are aware that we're about to have a monumental vote next month on Brexit and whether we leave the EU. Will that have an effect? I don't know whether any of you can answer that. Will that have an effect given that at the moment there's a European licensing agency? Do you believe that the vote is important in terms of what happens to the UK market?
Yes, Paul, you've got the ears of most of the people involved.
Rhylie, can we just grab a mic?
Certainly.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, thanks very much. So it's probably very apposite that we're sitting close to the Thames in London, because the European Medicines Agency is just a little way down the river from here.
I thought you were worried you'd be thrown in for your answer. No.
We're very high up here, so I think it would be a big splash. So, yes, it's an interesting topic, and a lot of people are talking about it at the moment. What could the consequences be one way or the other? But one of the strengths of the European regulatory and licensing system is that it is quite open in terms of its access. So countries who are currently geographically in Europe do participate in those systems. So like Norway, as you talked about as an example in lots of contexts around potential Brexit, but Norway is a full participant in the European regulatory system. So taking that as a fairly decent example, I wouldn't expect any radical changes, whatever the vote is here.
Now, that's really important. Now, obviously you can tell that this is so politically sensitive. Shouldn't the pharmaceutical industry have a say on that as well, just in terms of information? Because actually, you know, we're living longer. Pharmaceuticals are very important in terms of preventative health that we heard about from Alan earlier. Surely that the pharmaceutical industry should make those points to the general public.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure it's the pharmaceuticals industry's place to get too involved in that debate, but I'll answer your question from a slightly different angle, which is to think a bit about how the pharmaceutical industry operates itself. And we've heard that very clearly throughout this morning, that it's very much a global business and has to deal with lots of different environments, both political, regulatory, technical and scientific, and manages that really, really well. So I'm sure whatever local issues we have here in the UK about whether to stay as part of the European Union or not, the pharmaceutical industry will manage them really well, as it has to do with all the complexity that's part of its current business.
Perfect. You should be a politician, actually. That was very good. Very good answer indeed. Do we have any other questions from...
One for Alan.
Yes, let's hear your
Alan
question.
and Jim, if you want to chime in. No, just from a generics industry perspective, I was very encouraged to see that the days of the blockbuster are back. That was nice to hear. I just wondered, in one of the charts you showed Sovaldi and Harvoni, do you think that's an anomaly in being a blockbuster, small molecule, oral solid dose drug? Or could we see others, perhaps oral insulin tablets or multiple sclerosis?
That's another good question. I have to probably say to that yes, because you have a finite population of patients who really want medication and treatment now, and you have a 98% cure. That's almost like, shall we say, the heavens opening for Gilead to say, the market needs, patient needs, and here I have the perfect mousetrap. You know, and no one's needing to beat the way to the door. Although, of course, they face the issue of pricing. A lot of negatives on pricing, but you've got here a finite number of patients who, you know, within a finite period of time, all of those should be treated effectively, and so you could say that's a one-off. You're absolutely right. There are other unmet clinical needs that would be revolutionary. We've got the Opdivo, the new the anti-cancer for offering hope for lung cancer patients. And you've got to think that if the clinical work on that continues and the results improve, the fact that you start to offer what is close as much as you can get to a cure from a therapy, then who's to say? You're right with insulin. Anti-diabetic therapy is still, although it's moved forward a long way, it's still in its infancy almost. There's huge opportunities. And if someone could take a tablet that would correct all the insulin deficiencies and stimulate insulin production again, yeah, that would be a huge blockbuster. But I think in the short term, I don't think we're going to see anything else like the Hep C therapies at the moment for the near-term future.
What Dr. Ball said about this sort of gold standard, because it's fine, you know, having growth in these infusion and injectable drugs, but from a patient compliance and time with the doctor or teaching them to use inhalers, it's a lot more. A lot more than just telling them to take a tablet once a day.
There is a golden opportunity for payers to save money, because you talked about compliance, but you link it to convenience of administration. Now, you can give me the best, easiest, convenient drug to take, but as a stupid patient, I will not be compliant. You said about finished dose forms. The finished dose form doesn't end with a finished dose form. Patient information, you talked about patient information. Nobody reads the patient information leaflet. So how do you communicate with the patient to actually...
Well, I think actually that there is an issue here, which is that I think that patients are still far too receptive, that they are not empowered enough. So we have to turn it on its head, which is you have to say, I, as a physician, work with you in conjunction, but ultimately it's your responsibility. And I think there is a role to play, but I do think those patient leaflets could really...
Oh, no,
I know you have to put them in for regulatory.
Is there a role to play for the FDF event?
Oh, absolutely. This is what I was thinking. You go beyond the finished dose.
Yes.
Yes.
What does it mean? How do you take it? What are the consequences if you don't take it? What if you take it with something else? The only way around compliance issues is to have an implant, really. That's the only way to say you're going to be fully compliant.
Yeah.
I would also say that and I guess along those lines, but you're seeing a lot of innovation in the packaging world that where they're integrating technology into packages and to basically both monitor the dose that the patient is taking, but also to remind the patient to take the dose.
Yes.
And that's really that's something that's I think will be revolutionary over the next 5 to 10
Well,
years.
there are some nice apps actually on smartphones that do actually remind you, and you can put in, you can actually look up the drugs, and it puts a little picture of the drug and tells you what you should be taking and everything. Yeah. I've only just learned this, as you can tell. I'm very excited, over excited. Mark, you have a question?
Yeah. Quick question. Do you not think it is the responsibility of formulation developers and people who are coming up with technologies like sustained relays and things which could improve patient engagement? Is it not their responsibility to work with the pharmaceutical companies who are marketing the product to educate patients in how these dosage, or taking it at the right time, as we're talking about compliance and concordance, but we are leaving the entire headache to pharmaceutical companies to educate patients and physicians on the second instance. So why are formulation developing CDMOs or CMOs not educating patients? Why are they not engaging with pharmaceuticals to educate patients in compliance?
I think it depends on which country you're in. Here in the UK, I think probably I'd do a broad brush that GPs don't have enough time to actually spend with a patient to tell them everything they should tell them. The second thing is the industry would love that direct-to-patient communication. You get it certainly with some diabetic therapies, you get it certainly with some asthma therapies, and the patients benefit from that dialogue. There are many indications and therapeutic areas where you don't have that dialogue, which I think is your point. You could improve the dialogue if the pharmaceutical company had access to those patients. Of course, patient confidentiality is in place, so the ability to communicate and have a dialogue with your patient is in certain areas difficult. And again, we know if you do the internet searches, who's looking at what sites, you see there is a percentage of patients who do actually use that facility. And then when you look at the age groups, it's obviously at the younger end of the spectrum. So if we could lift that into the another decade or so.
That probably could be maybe a stream you should look into in your conference in terms of how to generate more communication from CDMOs and CMOs to engage with the patients and work hand in hand with pharma.
I would say just as a general point, the CMO's customer is the pharma company, and often the pharma company doesn't even want anybody to know that a CMO is making the product as opposed to themselves. And in the regulatory world, certainly in the US and the FDA world, it's the pharma company that's responsible. So even if there's if the drug, something goes wrong in the manufacturing process and there's a problem with the drug, it's the pharma company's responsibility to oversee the manufacturer. So there's really, the CMOs are separated, but so it's really the pharma company's responsibility. I would also say that, just quickly, that certainly we've seen increasingly in the U.S. where the providers, the the practitioner organizations and the payers, the insurance companies, because it's a different system, have figured out that, you know, if we can make sure people take their medications, we can keep them out of the hospital. And so, you know, they've started to employ social workers who follow up on patients to make sure the patients are taking their medications, because that's a lot cheaper than going to a practitioner, and it's also a lot cheaper than letting them go to the hospital because they miss their doses.
Also, if I could say, some pharmaceutical companies have actually taken that step to reach out to the end user effectively through their bid to be seen as content and thought leaders in the market. You know, we are seeing more and more pharmaceutical companies actually having separate websites to their company websites, very much talking about preventative cure or various conditions that certain age groups are facing, and they're doing that, as you mentioned also, Alan, through social media as well. So I think we've maybe seen a start of this trend.
Yeah, absolutely.
How much it gets picked up and is ignited by the rest of the market, it'll be interesting to see over the coming years.
And that exactly links to, you know, what we're trying to achieve, because CPhI as a brand is predominantly seen as a platform for doing business in pharma, but I think the FDF side is, you know, as Paul was also saying, it is the whole, you know, everything put together. So I think that's where FDF can potentially play a bigger role to industry in the communication element, and, you know, and what Cara is touching on with some of the companies already trying to reach out to patients directly. You know, there is absolutely a platform for that. So if we can achieve that over the years, there will be also a great win.
I was just going to chip in that I think as well it'd be a great forum to discuss from industry perspective how we get a reasonable reward for these innovations. Certainly from the generics industry perspective, there's lots of things we can do from formulation FDF point of view to improve known molecules and make them better for patient compliance and so on. But the question is okay, but then if I as a generic producer or the company that's come up with this improved formulation find my drug put in the same tender group or the same reference price group as the standard generic at 50 cents a pack, I can't do it. There's no way I can invest in this technology. So I think there's a huge barrier to improved FDF usage and patient compliance through the payer thing. So I think if we can engage payers, the insurance funds and the decision makers on that and say, okay, but if you want incremental innovation, there has to be some reward for the companies doing it.
I think that's an important point, because at last year's, which was the EGA conference, now Medicines for Europe, the patient groups were there, and they said they could not understand why, as a patient, that's exactly what they want. Improved convenience, ease of administration, and it's the one thing that they're not getting support from the NHS or other payers who say we're not willing to pay for that, when they're saying you don't understand what the patient really wants. You know, and for that extra money, you know, we would be a lot happier and be able to take our medicines easily, be more compliant. The end result in terms of financial numbers would probably be much better. But getting that message across is so difficult.
But then also it depends on your healthcare system, doesn't it? So it's very country specific. So for example, if you're on an anti-epileptic medication, it's much cheaper to give something that you take BD twice a day as opposed to a slow release product, because it costs more money. And at the end of the day, and particularly here in the UK, we have a spiralling problem. We just don't have enough money, and there has to be some form of rationing at some point, doesn't there?
But what happens if you have a breakthrough fit? What's the cost of that?
Well, I mean, you're right. You're absolutely right.
Because
the cost
I
then
forgot to take my second dose.
Well, I totally agree with you, but also you have to then look at the cost economics, because how many will then end up? Yes, you may have a seizure, but how many of those seizures end up in A&E? And I agree. I think. And as a former A&E doctor, I know all too well.
But then put yourself in the patient's shoes. It's not that you haven't ended up in A&E, but the fact you've had a seizure to the people around you, your family, that's very disconcerting or worrying. the ability to have a once-a-day formulation. Okay,
Totally.
if you forget your once-a-day formulation as well, you're in trouble anyway. So the compliance and convenience aspect, you have to, as I said earlier, you have to try and weigh the two
So
together.
do you think that perhaps we're at the beginning of a much longer journey, which is and in Europe, where actually the pharmaceutical industry has always had to behave within certain parameters? Do you think it's changing in that clearly you want to be able to talk directly to consumers? We, as clinicians, want consumers to be more informed. Surely isn't that the extrapolation of that argument actually possibly, we should go down more of the American route? I'm not saying with those ridiculous things at the end of the adverts where they talk really quickly and no one can understand what they say, but you know what I mean. But possibly isn't the extrapolation of that argument that actually we need to work together to ensure that patients get the maximum amount of relevant information?
I think
the view here, because some of the work we're doing is not just about products, but it's about working with the health system here in the UK, with NHS England and the devolved countries, looking at something they're calling medicines optimization, which is we spend a lot on medicines. It's 10+% of the healthcare budgets, but do we really get the best out of them? And a lot of that investment in medicines is wasted for some of the reasons we've heard being described this morning. Either the patients don't know how to use them properly, they don't read the leaflets, they don't understand there is a balance between the benefits and the potential risk of side effects. And there probably does need to be a different way of running the conversation, so there is more connection between what pharmaceutical companies are doing, the information that's being given to patients through their healthcare professionals, through their pharmacists and their doctors, but also what increasingly they find out for themselves independently. So I think we all know about patients pitching up at their doctors with the printouts that they've got for themselves. So they are getting a lot more informed, and perhaps some of the practices that we work that constrain at the moment are perhaps a little bit outdated, because regulation by its nature always tends to lag behind. But I think we will see a lot going on in that field, bringing things much more closer together, which does again fit with the FDF concept, and patients becoming much more to the centre of the conversation about making decisions for their own healthcare and using newer technologies and apps and electronic enhancements to the medicines themselves as reminders. So I think we've got a long way to go on that, but I think the trend is clear, and I can see it only going in one way.
Any other questions from the floor at all? Perhaps, yes. Hang on, let me skip over to you.
Thank you. I wonder if Jim would like to comment on what's going to be the effect of the generic drug user fee amendments on companies in the US, and what are the CMO's view on this?
So this is GDUFA.
Right, yeah.
Thank you.
Well, you know, GDUFA, of course, we're living under GDUFA 1 now, and one of the elements of that has been to charge a fee to any facility that's manufacturing a generic to pay for the inspection, and that's been that's been an issue for the CMO industry, because it wasn't anticipated in a lot of their contracts, and so kind of who pays for that, whether the CMO pays for it or the customer pays for that, has been an issue. But that's all of that is up for negotiation at the moment, and because the renewal of GDUFA is being negotiated, and the bill is being developed right now. But you know, certainly the concept has been to by charging, well, prior to GDUFA, I think as probably most people know, if you filed for a new drug application, a branded drug application, you would pay a fee to have the file reviewed and the facility inspected. But until GDUFA, that wasn't the case for generics, and so there ended up being an enormous backlog of generic approval applications, because there weren't the resources to review them and to do the inspections. The idea of GDUFA was to provide the resources to do that. It's had some benefit in that way, but not nearly as much, I would say, as the industry and the FDA had hoped. So figuring out that it's a bit of it's a major negotiation between the generic industry and the FDA and the CMO industry on what the fees should be and how more resources can be put into place to further reduce that backlog. So I think the impact, certainly I think the impact has been, say, to reduce the number of applications. Often when the application was free, companies would put in an application without necessarily an intention of marketing the drug, but just to have it there just in case. But now it's certainly, companies generally file the application and pay the fee because they intend to have a commercial product on the market. That's helped the backlog, and I think it also helps drug prices. But I think I'm not sure what the ultimate implications of the next round of GDUFA are going to be because, frankly, we don't know any of the details yet.
So we'll wait and see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like everything else, we'll wait and see.
Isn't that the truth? Yes,
Yeah.
thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, time is pressing, so I do have to move on. So finally, in this live launch of FDF, I'd like to introduce the brand director of UBM Pharma Portfolio, Rutger Oudejans. Rutger.
Thank you very much. And yeah, so before we finish, and I can't believe we're already finishing because, I just feel we actually started with this, and I think there's so much more room for discussion and engagement. But all good things come to an end, and this is just the beginning of what we're trying to achieve. So I would like to thank very much, Jim, Alan, and Paul. You've really been outstanding in helping to frame, the understanding and knowledge of this promising sector of the pharma industry. And so I also want to thank the media representatives here today. You've been very kind to attend. You have given us very good input and thoughts and questions. And of course, we encourage you to write a lot on this launch because we need all the help we can get in trying to put our message across. And of course, I want to also really thank the viewers online. We can't see you, but we heard you. And we really hope that this is just a start of continuous engagement with the industry and with people interested in FDF. So as we all said, the new FDF event will provide the ability for all the parts of the finished dosage formulation market to meet together and to exchange ideas and to do business. So today is really a beginning for us of a new chapter for CPhI, as we evolve also with the market to reflect the challenges and changes our exhibitors are seeing, and to give them a global platform to meet these needs. So as pointed out earlier by Cara, this is the first time at a true global level that a networking content and exhibition platform has been created specifically for finished dosage formulations. So looking at the future, we really forecast this part of CPhI growing extremely quickly, and we also envisage more types of new audience attending. These are natural synergies with diagnostic providers, licensors, delivery platforms, and distributors, but also not to mention all the new avenues this FDF launch will open for our existing audiences by widening the range of partners they can meet in one location. So while we celebrate today the launch of the FDF event at CPhI Worldwide, we will also see finished dosage formulations very much as an integral zone within our inaugural CPhI North America, which we are hosting next year from 16th to 18th of May in Philadelphia. In US, this is also creating the only horizontal pharma trade show of its kind. CPhI represents all parts of the value chain, and that's also what we try to put together in the American market. But FDF will be one of the three lead zones of the ecosystem that we will focus on to support the CPhI North America launch next to ICSE and our packaging brand Innopac. So in longer term, we also discussed India of course. People will know that we have a very successful brand in India called CPhI India and PMEC India, focused on pharmaceutical machinery. And that's another market that we will focus on to introduce a finished dosage formulations event within. And in fact, actually, this year at CPhI India 2016, we are celebrating 10 years of CPhI in India. And we will celebrate that through Pharma Week, which is a new week-long event that recognizes CPhI India as a seedbed of the growing regional pharma industry. So I'm looking also very much forward to that. So our commitments and ambitions to the finished dosage market go a great deal further than just providing an exhibition platform. And today is really a good example of that, because we will continue to produce market analysis, engage with thought leaders like all the gentlemen here today, and also really deliver content that helps industries, executives make better informed decisions. So at our CPhI Worldwide this year in Barcelona in October, we will introduce a special track during our Pre-Connect Congress, which is organized by Tara, which is really dedicated to evaluating the best opportunities, challenges, and considerations across finished dose formulations. So building on some of the themes that we've covered on this morning, there will be sessions looking at techniques to increase bioavailability. We will have sessions on compulsory licensing challenges for generics, further rise of O2C products, and also increasing consolidation among emerging and developed generic producers. So, as we have said today, collectively we see governments, both developed and developing, looking to increase their use of generic drugs, and with the drugs pipelines really dominated by poorly bioavailable compounds, a clear picture emerges that finished dosage forms represent a really true opportunity for pharma companies. So in the nearly 3 decades that CPhI has helped to internationalize pharma, global healthcare has of course undergone some dynamic changes. But now, with the ability of different parts of this complex supply chain coming together, particularly around this finished dosage, we are on the cusp of a new age of advanced formulations. So what I expect and what I do hope is that over the next 5 years, CPhI will be a home for the community to centralize these new collaborative approaches. So I really hope that everyone really enjoyed our small debate as much as we did enjoy hosting it. And so I want to thank everyone again for their very valuable contributions. And I look forward to helping the industry harness the full potential again at CPhI in Barcelona later this year. So thank you very much.
Sorry, I just needed to follow up from Rutger to say thank you to everybody in this room, and also, as Rutger mentioned earlier, thank you to those online. We had a staggering number of questions that came in and engagement online too, and I just wanted to say I'm sorry that we couldn't answer all of the questions, but we will post live stream for you. It just truly reinstates the interest in this FDF launch at CPhI. Thank you.
Lovely, and thank you very much to you as well for being my glamorous co-host.
Thank you very much to you, Dr. Ball.
Oh, well, bless you, bless you. So there's a lot of thanks going on in the room. And thank you. I'd just like to reiterate that, say thank you very much indeed for watching and for being here at this launch of this very exciting FDF event. You can find out more if you want more information at cphi.com. And all it remains for me to do really is to thank all of our speakers who I thought were absolutely exemplary. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you also to our journalists here who have kept us entertained and questioned and have certainly made sure that we've all been on our toes. You can also look forward to seeing you in Barcelona on the 4th to the 6th of October for FDF part of CPhI Worldwide. And I just want to finish with one final thought. I'm a very proud Londoner. We're at the top of a very glamorous building here in sparkling sunshine, and it's May. Look at the view, and if you haven't visited London, now's your chance. Thank you from all of us here, and see you again soon.